Long ago, Egypt was the most powerful kingdom on earth. Its cities rose behind towering walls, its temples shone beneath the burning sun, and the Nile River flowed through the land like a living serpent of life. But not everyone lived in palaces. Far from the golden columns, a people worked without rest. They were the Hebrews. From the moment the sun rose, men and women carried mud and stone. They built storehouses, walls, and entire cities for the Pharaoh. They lived under watch. They lived exhausted. They lived as slaves. And yet, among them, ancient stories were still told. Stories of promises, stories of a God who does not forget. From the heights of the palace, the Pharaoh watched the city below. He saw his monuments rising, and he saw the Hebrew people multiplying. Fear took root in his heart. The Pharaoh spoke from his throne. "They are many. If they continue to grow, one day they will rise against us." And he made a cruel decision. He ordered that every Hebrew baby boy be thrown into the Nile River. But in the midst of fear and darkness, God had not remained silent. A story was about to begin, the story of a child chosen to change the destiny of a people. The order went out from the palace and spread through the city. It entered humble homes and filled every birth with fear. In a humble home, a Hebrew woman gave birth to a child. When she looked at him, she knew she could not give him over to death. For 3 months, she kept him hidden. She quieted his cries. She closed doors. She lived with her heart racing. But the day came when she could no longer hide him. And then she made an impossible decision. She prepared a basket of woven reeds. She sealed it carefully so no water could enter. And she walked to the edge of the Nile River. She held the child one last time. She kissed him and placed him inside the basket. She set it afloat. This was not abandonment. It was faith. The basket drifted slowly across the water. It passed through tall reeds. Birds flew nearby. The river continued on its course. The current carried the basket to a quiet place near the gardens of the palace. The daughter of Pharaoh went down to the river with her attendants. She heard a strange cry. She ordered the basket to be brought to her. When she saw the child, something changed in her expression. She did not see an enemy. She saw a life. She knew he was Hebrew. She knew her father's order, but she chose to save him. She called for a woman to care for the child. Without knowing it, she called the baby's own mother. When the child grew, he returned to the palace, and the princess gave him a name, Moses. Moses grew up as a prince of Egypt. He walked through vast hallways. He played in courtyards surrounded by towering columns. He learned to read, to write, and to understand the laws of the kingdom. He trained alongside other young nobles. He ran through the courtyards. He rode horses. He watched armies march in perfect formation. Egypt taught him power. But Moses saw something else as well. From the balconies of the palace, he watched the slaves labor under the sun. He saw their weary backs. He heard the shouts of the taskmasters. Something within him was not at peace. The prince of Egypt was beginning to hear the call of a people he did not yet know were his own. With the passing of years, Moses could no longer be satisfied with watching from above. One day, he left the palace and walked beyond the walls. He left behind the columns, the gardens, and the shadow of power. The sun beat down on the labor fields. The air was thick with dust and strain. Moses moved among the slaves. He saw men bent beneath heavy stones. He saw wounded hands. He saw children working in silence. For the first time, he was not watching as a prince. He was watching as one of them. A Hebrew slave collapsed to the ground, exhausted. He tried to rise. He could not. An Egyptian taskmaster approached in fury. He shouted at him. He ordered him to stand. The slave looked up, pleading for time. The blow fell. Moses stopped. He looked at the taskmaster. He looked at the slave. He looked around. There was no one else. The silence was heavy. In that moment, something inside Moses broke. Moses stepped forward. The confrontation was fast, confused, impulsive. It was not planned. It was not calculated. When it was over, the taskmaster lay motionless on the sand. Moses struggled to breathe. He looked at his hands. He looked at the body on the ground, and he understood. He had crossed a line. That day, the prince of Egypt ceased to exist. The news reached the palace quickly. The Pharaoh heard what had happened. His face hardened. The decision was immediate. Moses had to die. The palace, once a home, became a trap. That same night, Moses left the city. He crossed empty streets. He passed through the gates of Egypt. He moved forward without looking back. Behind him remained the walls, the statues, the power. The desert did not ask who Moses was. Long days beneath the sun, cold nights under the stars. Moses walked until his strength was gone, until silence became his companion. He arrived in the land of Midian. There, he was welcomed by a simple people, a place where a new life began. He tended sheep in quiet fields. He walked long paths under the open sky. He learned to walk slowly. He learned to listen. The years passed. The man who had grown up among gold and power now lived among dust and patience. One day, Moses led the flock farther than usual. He climbed rocky paths to a lonely mountain. The wind blew strongly. The place was silent. Then he saw it, a bush in flames. But something was different. The fire was burning, but it did not consume the bush. Moses approached with caution. Each step seemed to slow time itself. The light was intense. The air trembled. Then a voice broke the silence.
Moses, Moses, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them from the hand of Egypt.
Moses said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? I will be with you, and this will be the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought my people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This is my name forever, and this is how I am to be remembered throughout all generations." Moses came down from the mountain. He was no longer fleeing. Now he was returning. He took his staff. He looked toward the horizon and began the journey back. The desert lay behind him. Egypt was waiting. Moses returned to Egypt after many years. The walls were still standing. The statues still stood watch. The palace still gleamed beneath the sun. But Moses was no longer the young man who had fled. He walked through the streets with steady steps. People stopped to watch him. Some recognized him. Others felt that something important was about to happen. Moses reached the gates of the palace. He passed through them without looking back. The place that once had been his home was now his mission. Inside, the Pharaoh sat on his throne, surrounded by counselors and priests. Moses stepped forward until he stood before him. Moses spoke with a steady voice and spoke the words that had been entrusted to him. "Let my people go." The Pharaoh looked at him with contempt. He questioned the God who spoke through Moses and declared that Egypt does not free slaves. The hall fell silent. Moses held the Pharaoh's gaze. He did not step back. Then God answered. At dawn, the Pharaoh went down to the Nile River. Moses followed him to the riverbank. The Nile was the life of Egypt: water, food, trade, power. Moses raised his staff. He lifted his eyes toward the heavens. And he spoke, not with his own words, but with the voice of the God who had sent him. He said that Egypt would know that the Lord is God. "Take the staff in your hand, Moses." Then the staff touched the water. Before the eyes of all, the river began to change. The clear water turned dark. Fish floated lifeless on the surface. The stench spread through the air. The people cried out. The priests rushed forward. Egypt watched in disbelief. The river was turned to blood. Egypt trembled before their eyes. But the Pharaoh hardened his heart. He saw the sign. He knew the power. And yet he refused to listen. Days later, something strange happened. From the river came frogs. Thousands of them. They leapt across the roads. They entered homes. They climbed the steps of the palace. There was no place where frogs were not found. The Pharaoh sent for Moses. He asked him to plead with his God. He promised to let the people go. The frogs disappeared. But when relief came, the Pharaoh once again hardened his heart. Then the dust of the ground rose up. Tiny insects covered people and animals. They tormented them without rest. After that, swarms of flies came. They invaded markets, homes, and palaces. Egypt no longer looked like an ordered kingdom. It looked out of control. But the Pharaoh resisted. The animals began to fall ill. Livestock collapsed in the fields. Work came to a halt. Food began to run short. Then people and animals suffered painful afflictions. The people murmured. Fear grew, but the Pharaoh still refused to yield. One day the sky grew dark. The wind blew with force. Thunder rolled. Then hail fell with a power never seen before. It shattered trees. It destroyed crops. The sky seemed to fight against the earth. Egypt looked upward in fear. When the hail stopped, a cloud appeared on the horizon. Locusts. They covered the land. They consumed everything that was still green. The fields were left barren. Then something different came. Darkness. It was not an ordinary night. It was thick, heavy. For 3 days, Egypt was wrapped in darkness. People did not move. Time seemed to stand still. But the Pharaoh still would not yield. That night, God spoke to Moses once again.
"Take a lamb without blemish, one for each household. You shall sacrifice it at twilight. With its blood, you shall mark the doorposts of your houses. That blood will be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no calamity will touch your homes. That night I will pass through Egypt. It is the final sign, a night that will be remembered throughout all generations."
The people obeyed what the Lord had commanded. The doors were marked, the houses were shut, and night fell over Egypt. At midnight, the Lord passed through the land. The marked houses were kept safe. But in Egypt, a great cry was heard. And that very night, the Pharaoh sent for Moses. His voice was no longer firm. It was broken. He said, "Go, take your people." And so, slavery came to an end. That same night, the Hebrew people began to leave Egypt. They did not leave as conquerors. They left as families. Fathers holding their children by the hand. Elders walking slowly. Animals moving through the crowd. For generations they had been slaves. Now they walked free, though they did not yet know what it meant to live that way. The gates of the city were left behind. Egypt watched as its labor force disappeared into the darkness. The journey through the desert was uncertain, but they were not alone. By day, a great cloud moved ahead of them, marking the way and giving them shade. By night, a brilliant light guided them, illuminating the path through the darkness. And the people understood that God was with them. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the Pharaoh watched his city in silence. The fields were empty. The workshops stood still. The palace felt strange without its familiar noise. Then the rage returned. "Pharaoh, what have we done? We have let our slaves go." The Pharaoh called for his army, war chariots, trained horses, armed soldiers, and Egypt set out in pursuit. The Hebrew people reached an unexpected place. Before them, the Red Sea, vast, moving without haste. Behind them, a cloud of dust. The roar of chariots thundered across the land. The people felt fear. Ahead, the sea. Behind, the army.
Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it.
The people stood still, staring at the horizon. No one spoke. Then, little by little, they began to understand. They had crossed the sea. They had left slavery behind. For the first time, they were free. Moses led the people through the wilderness. Later, on Mount Sinai, God gave them laws to live as a just and free nation. Moses was not a king. He wore no crown. But he was the man who obeyed God when no one else dared, and his story was written forever. Because when God decides to set people free, even the sea steps aside.